Hello, and welcome to the Smart Injury Doctors Podcast, the injury market's top program for doctors, lawyers, and insurers who want to gain greater insight on how to improve patient recovery results and deliver better services in the U.S. injury market. Please welcome your host, Dr. Jeffrey Allen Kronk.
Okay, doctor, what I want to talk about today is not even the IME doctor can see angular findings of spinal ligament injury. Not even the IME doctor. Now, what this is going to lead into a theme here, but one of the things that I loved, I remember the first time I cracked page 379 in the AMA guides, it said motion of individual segments cannot be determined by physical examination, but is evaluated with flexion, extension, regenograms, x-rays. Basically, I could never pronounce that word. Loss of motion segment is defined as anterior-posterior motion of one vertebra over the other that is greater than 3.5 millimeters in the cervical spine, greater than 2.5 millimeters in the thoracic spine, and greater than 4.5 millimeters in the lumbar spine. Now, that's beautiful, right? Because I remember the first time I read that, and I went, because one of the things you have as a problem in the fact that you have IME doctors, and I know my experience with IME doctors is a lot of times they would say things that were not necessarily true, or, you know, the reports, I don't know, I'm not saying it was intentional, but they just would use things and twist it a little bit. And so, you know, what you want to be as a provider is you don't want to be in that bucket. You don't want to twist or pervert anything. You want to actually go, you know, this is the way it is. So when I saw that, I realized, okay, look, the beautiful part about excessive motion testing is it cannot be determined by physical examination. That means in an IME, it can't be determined. It can't be ruled in. It can't be ruled out. It can't be determined, no, they don't have 3.8 millimeters of translation at C4 and C5. They don't have a ratable level of ligament damage at that level. None of that can be ruled out in a general IME, because it's not determined by physical examination, but it's also not determined by eyeball examination. All right, so the other side has to be equally as judicious with its statements. So I know, you know, across the country, I talk to a lot of providers, and one of the things that they'll say is, well, I can see findings, and you know, if I'm going to see these findings, then I'm going to send it to spinal kinetics. If not, then I don't. You can't see angular findings. One of the beautiful things that I did and have done a lot of is I'll actually just go, okay, let's go to a, you know, I'm in a seminar. I'll put up a set of X-rays, and we'll go, all right, take a look at these X-rays. Is there a surgical level of ligament damage here? And I'll just put up, the X-rays will have a surgical level of angular finding. If so, what level? There is no agreement. There is complete agreement in the room then that you cannot see angular findings. And I can do the same thing for translation findings. I can put up surgical levels of translation findings and have the whole room think of different segments and find out that there's very little agreement with it until you measure it. And so there is no way to determine these things. Angular findings are half the findings. I mean, could you imagine being, so if you're going to say that you can see angular findings, just like the radiologist, the IME radiologist that says they can see angular findings, the trial and the trial questioning is really easy. I mean, you just bring out a protractor that's got a protractor arm on it. You know, one of those things that's got two arms, and you open the arms and it gets into a bigger and bigger angle. And you just open the arms and say, okay, what angle is this? You open it a little bit more and you say, what angle is this? There's no way in hell that the providers are going to be able to say, oh, that's a 9 degree angle. Oh, that's a 13 degree angle. Oh yeah, that one there, that's a 6 degree angle. Oh, that one there, that's a 7 degree angle. Okay, it's impossible. You can't do it. So for providers that say that they can see these conditions, you're minimizing your own condition. You're minimizing the significance of this condition. It's a very significant injury, and it's a permanent injury. Disc injuries are not necessarily permanent. As a matter of fact, if you just pull up any research today and just, you know, if you want to do something for fun, just Google search, hey, how many discs spontaneously, will actually regress and see what it says. I mean, if you got a disc bulb, 13% at 11.5 months are going to spontaneously regress. If you got a disc, prolapse, protruded disc, 52% of them are going to retract. Extruded disc, 70.4% are going to retract. Sequestered disc, 93% going to be reabsorbed. Average time of study, 11 months. Okay, so this thing that we call the ligament injury or the spinal support injury, when you basically hyperstretch that ligament, it's a permanent injury. You can't put the hyperstretch can't come back. Now in the future, you might have stem cells. You might have soft waves out there that have supersonic waves that basically are infiltrating and bringing in the stem cells and the stem cell precursors. I don't know. We don't have any studies that show that, what's happening on that end. We do have studies that are showing that, and case studies with that type of technology that show, hey, heart effraction rates improve. So, there is capability of functional improvement. I don't know. Maybe there is functional ligament improvement, or maybe there could be. But the bottom line is right now, that's still the Wild West. That's, right now, these are still permanent without the ability to go back injuries. They are the most problematic injury. In my world, they're more problematic than the disc. The disc has basically two symptoms associated with these other ligament conditions, have all the other, the spinal support ligaments have all the other ligaments symptoms with it. I mean, all you have to do is go to Medscape and just put in, cervical sprain indication and just put it in, and you'll see what it actually says. And it'll give you all kinds of symptoms. It's going to show you neck pain. It's going to show you headaches. It's going to show you scapular pain. It's going to show you tinnitus. It's going to show you concussive syndromes. It's going to show you headaches. It's going to show you a lot of symptoms. You go out to the disc, it's going to show you two. Basically, it's going to tell you that you've got localized pain and radicular complaint. It's not going to talk about tinnitus. It's not going to talk about vertigo. It's not going to talk about balance difficulties or visual disturbances or drop attacks or ear fullness or post-concussive syndrome or increased intracranial pressure or TMJ pain, all associated with cervical instability from upper cervical ligament injuries. Right? It's not going to show you any of that. So to me, the disc is important, but these other ligaments are more important. And so if you're going to get into that field, you have to drop this idea that you can see these things. You cannot see them. That's the same with the idea that you're just going to adjust a hypomobile segment. You're a diversified adjuster. You're not going to just adjust a hypomobile segment. You might put your finger on it. You might say the majority of force is started and initiated there, but it's not specific enough to say you're not going to affect the other joints. So these are rationales, and these are things that have been talked about that are simply not true. And where it gets really embarrassing is in deposition. If you have somebody that actually understands this condition and you want to hold the fact that you can see these, or that what you do in your clinic is you wait, and you if you didn't see it, you wait, and then you wait later and you say, well, you know what? This patient, we've been under 5 months of care, and basically we've treated the patient 45 times, and now we're going to send out because the patient's not, operating, or they're not healing under the means that we think they should have, and now you're going to send it out, and all of a sudden it comes back and it's got 2 levels of ligament damage, angular findings. We'll use angular findings since they're the hardest to see. 2 levels of it. I want to be in the deposition with you. I want to be the defense attorney at that point, because I got some serious questions to ask you. Because you basically put a patient under care for months and months and months of care, and there's a seriously significant injury that you missed. And now you're putting months and months of care instead of working it up properly in the first place. Did your care actually cause more problem? Was it that you didn't understand it, and now your care is causing the patient to never fully recover? Did your condition make it worse? Did your treatment there's so many questions I can ask you. And there's so many questions you avoid if you just do a workup right. And you do it right from the get-go. And be the professional that does that. Don't be the dabbler professional. And my gosh, the professional that drives me the most crazy is the one that doesn't do the right thing because the environment dictates that they shouldn't, or they're afraid because the environment dictates that they shouldn't. Because that then becomes an integrity issue. I mean, if clinic you understand exactly what you're doing, and I did back in 1995 when I read this book, when I read the AMA guides, the evaluation of permanent impairment. First of all, when I read what alteration motion segment integrity was, I said, my God, the AMA validated chiropractic greater than we have validated ourselves. Because basically they said the subluxation complex, subluxation being a misalignment of the spine or mismovement of a spine that causes nerve interference. It's the exact identical definition as a spinal instability. So call it what you want to. Call it a spinal subluxation. Call it a spinal instability. Call it intersegmental somatic dysfunction. I don't care what you call it. It's the same. Right? And they said that condition came with a 25% impairment. It meant that I was working on something that was so significant, and it was very validating. And I, to this day, have never let that be invalidated. But you have to understand, and you have to work it upright. I understood I couldn't see angular findings. I understood the value of independent third-party evaluations. I understood the value of how significant this condition was. I understood that I wanted, if at all possible, done independently. I understood what the angular findings were and how you found them, what the translation findings were and how you found them. And by the way, there's some softwares out there. There's some really, really crappy softwares out there. I mean, I'm talking like grade A junk that's out in the market right now. I just look at the stuff and I go, oh my God, one, it's not programmed correctly. It's just bad. And the problem is they can sell this crap to the providers simply because the providers don't know. They don't know. It's not your job to take the time and really study this and get into it and really look at it and geek out on it. So it's not your time. But what you want to do is you want to be with somebody that's been in the market for a long time, that's resolved these things. And, make sure that if you're using a system and you're billing for a system and are that one, it's FDA cleared. Because when you start billing for things, it's a whole different ballgame now. I mean, once you start billing, you're basically saying that I am responsible now for this system. So, angular findings are significant. In that same page in the AMA guides, when it said, "Hey, look, loss of motion segment integrity is also defined as a difference in angular motion of two adjacent motion segments greater than 15 at L1, L2, L2, L3, and L3, L4, and greater than 20 at L4 and 5. And the loss of integrity of the lumbar sacral joint is defined as an angular motion between L5 and S1 is greater than 25. And the spine loss motion segment integrity is defined as the motion of level in question that is more than 11 degrees greater than either adjacent segment in the cervical spine. These angular findings are significant. So when you minimize this condition, I'm telling you minimize yourself and you minimize your profession. And that's the problem I have with minimizing it. I'm not into the providers that understand this condition should be the highest paid, especially there's three things to it actually. One, understanding it and doing the workups correctly. Two, getting great treatment results with it. 3, documenting it simply and expertly so everybody can understand what you're doing and what's been done. So those 3 steps, if you can do those 3 steps, you're the most valuable people in the market today. You're the most valuable doctors in the market today, and you should be some of the highest paid because these conditions are uber expensive. They're uber expensive to industry. They're uber expensive to The personal injury market, they're uber expensive to the insurers. They're uber expensive to everybody. And so, you should be the best. The people that understand these and really do a high professional job with this type of injury should be the highest paid providers in the market today, bar none. But what I want to end with is you can't see translation findings. You cannot eyeball this stuff. So if you're out there saying, and if you talk to somebody like me and you say, hey, look, we eyeball our x-rays and then we send out, I don't know what to say to you. That's because it's very difficult to communicate with you because what you're saying is not true. So my only way to communicate with you is to invalidate you or to show you that what you're saying is not true. And it's a tricky communication. It really is a tricky communication. Now, I've been doing it for years, so it's not tricky anymore. I just flat out say, look, you can't see these things. If you want me to show you, we'll get on a Zoom call and I'll pull up 6 or 7 x-ray studies and you can tell me where the serious findings are. And then if you can even get 30% of it right, 20% of it right, I'll be like, yeah, great. I doubt it. So, and then if you still say, well, I can see them after a demonstration like that, I don't know what to say to you. Because I guess if you say something to it yourself enough, you start to believe it. I had an uncle of mine, and we would come over and he'd say, hey, see this car over here? Yeah. He said, well, that car's the fastest car in the United States. As a matter of fact, when Robert Kennedy actually was campaigning in our area, the FBI called and asked to use that car as a possible getaway in case something happened. They were just things that he would say where you were like, wow, there's no way that's true, but he believed it. So, you can fall into that trap of, hey, you said something to yourself so much that you believe it, but it's not true. And it's certainly not true when you get an expert who really understands this stuff and you go up against that expert. Man, you got to have your stuff together because, inevitably that's going to happen in the really large cases. So I just wanted to touch on this point in a podcast. Look, not even the IME provider can see these. That was always super great for me. I understood this. If you're a doctor out there, you cannot see ligament findings. You're not good with translation findings, and you're almost non-existent when it comes to angular findings as far as trying to see them. So doctors, if you're interested, this is some of the stuff we teach in the Smart Injury Doctors program. Call us at 800-940-6513. And I'll tell you what, one of the biggest things that holds doctors back is when they think that they know it all in this area. This is a market that is so ripe. There's so few providers in this market, in the spinal ligament injury market, that really understand it, that it's just ripe. There's no competition in it. So you want to know more about our program, call us at 800-940-6513 or look us up at thespinalkinetics.com, at smartinjurydoctors.com. Doctors, as always, I appreciate your time, your attention, what you do, and I look forward to delivering more content on the next podcast.
You've been listening to the Smart Injury Doctors Podcast, the #1 audio production show for professionals in the U.S. injury market that want to deliver better injury services to the patients, clients, or insureds they serve. If you like what you heard today, please leave us a review and don't forget to join us on our next program.